Okay, we're back on the record on KCR 22211623. Before the jurors are brought in, we've got a couple of issues we want to put on the record outside the presence of the jurors relating to making a record about exhibits in this case. The first matter the court would bring up is that earlier in the trial, the court noticed that several of the state's marked proposed exhibits had reference as sort of Bates numbers or other markings on some of those exhibits that referenced the term Vallow/Daybell. The court raised a concern sua sponte about a possible appearance of the fact that in Lori Vallow's case, the trial's already concluded and she was convicted. I didn't want reference necessarily expressly on all the exhibits to that trial, as some of the jurors may or may not know about that, depending on what they revealed in voir dire. And so the state has thereafter, I think maybe one came in with a reference to Vallow on a Bates stamp. The state's been redacting those references as it relates to referencing Vallow. From the state, does anyone wish to mention anything further to clarify the record on handling those exhibits and how they've been admitted in the case?
No, that's an accurate representation, Your Honor, and we'll continue to redact those.
Okay.
If there's any left.
All right. So that's the issue there. On other exhibits that came in today, they were offered as defense exhibits 6 and 7. The court in a sidebar got together with the evidence clerk as well as staff attorney and counsel to look at those exhibits before they were admitted or published and make sure they were properly marked. It was pointed out that many or most of those exhibits contained improper dialogue, written expressions on them or labels that would not be admissible, descriptions, for example, that were argumentative. And so while the court is permitting the defense to go forward and those exhibits have been admitted, the court is going to ensure that before they're published, they will have those references removed, and we won't give those to the jurors for deliberation or publish them unless those references are not included in the actual exhibits. I did make a curative instruction as one exhibit apparently was published briefly to the jurors, and that was the basis of the court's curative instruction for the jurors to disregard that information that may have been descriptive and not evidence in the case. Does the state wish to make any further clarification on, well, I'll start with the defense because those were defense exhibits. Mr. Pryor, anything further on those exhibits and how they were handled today by the court?
Judge, a number of the exhibits have descriptions of what they are in terms of content, and I understand that what I understand is the court just wants the number and the sub number and delete all of the other descriptions, whether the court feels they're inappropriate or not the proper description of that exhibit. I can delete all of those.
Okay, and I do wish those to be not included.
Okay.
Anything further on that issue from the state?
Your Honor, with regard to that issue, I think the state just wants to clarify that the exhibit that was inadvertently shown is actually, to the state's knowledge, not an exhibit. It's not a stipulated to document. We had been talking about specific items that had been pulled from the Cellbrite or the iCloud accounts. The document that was published to the jury was not that. It actually made reference to grand jury proceedings, a preliminary hearing, and Lori Vallow's trial. And then I think it had something marking inconsistent statements, and that was published to the jury. The state does have concerns about that. I recognize the court did give a curative instruction. I think at the outset of this trial, the court gave an instruction to the jurors they were not supposed to consider Ms. Vallow, whether she had a trial or what any outcome was of any proceedings, and they weren't supposed to speculate. So I think that has now been published to them. I recognize the court has given that curative instruction. It also came to the court's attention that maybe there was a comment made sometime around that same time from counsel to the bailiffs about not touching his computer. So I think we just wanted to make a record of that. But we do recognize the court has given that instruction But for purposes of appellate reasons, we wanted to make sure that we had a clear record.
And Judge, in response, I don't know that there's anything appropriate for me to direct a bailiff not to touch my computer when I'm stepping away from the podium. In regards to the other things, Judge, somehow those statements may have inadvertently been exposed by way of I should have probably removed the HDMI cord, and I think they were reflecting some of my notes. So I can relay that, but there was no intent to publish that to the jury.
Okay, well, on the second to last point there, well, on your final point, Mr. Pryor, and what the state's argued, what was published, okay, I'll clarify, was not an exhibit, was not evidence. The court did give a curative instruction. It was inadvertently published by the defendant in this case. At this point, because it was published, all we can do is have that curative instruction and make sure we have additional instructions in our final instructions to the jurors that they are only to consider admitted evidence, and that they were specifically instructed that evidence is not admitted in the case, and leave it to the jurors to commit to following those instructions. So from what I briefly saw, I'll note it wasn't up there that long. I don't believe it created more of an issue than is necessary that could be cured by the curative instruction given. So I won't draw any further attention to it on behalf of the jurors hearing about it, other than a general new instruction that will come with them for deliberations about what may be considered. On the point of what apparently was said by Mr. Pryor to the bailiffs, I'll just indicate, of course, the bailiffs are in charge of the courtroom at the direction of the court. And I'll instruct all counsel to be respectful of the bailiffs as they do their jobs, and in particular to not make any sort of comments in front of the jurors that may confuse the jurors or concern the jurors as it relates to how the bailiffs are doing their job in here. I have full confidence in the way the bailiffs have handled this courtroom throughout the trial. And so I'll just leave it up to counsel to follow that instruction as well, and refrain from any types of editorial type comments in front of jurors, please, while this trial goes on. So those are the issues we needed to discuss outside the presence of the jurors. At this time, then, we'll continue with the cross-examination. Is the defense going to be ready to proceed and have the jurors returned?
Yes, Judge. And for clarification, we are ending at 3:15 if I'm going to try to get through this.
We are going to end at 3:15 today because
Okay.
we've got another hearing at 3:30.
Okay.
Okay, how long will that take? Just a couple. All right, we'll go ahead and go off the record for now as we reset a device. We'll have the jurors brought in while we're doing that, and then we'll continue on with evidence until 3:15. So we can have the jurors brought in now. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And it's fine. It's the one.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, Ms. Gibbs is still under oath. Mr. Pryor is conducting cross-examination. As I mentioned, we'll go for another 25 minutes here till 3:15 and conclude, since the court's going to have another hearing outside the presence of the jurors later today.
Judge, the technical issues are resolved.
Yes, you can proceed.
Now, Ms. Gibb, I need just a clarification if I could. You talked about how light and dark are they something that's not within your practice? Is that what I understand?
Not the way that they described light and darkness in my beliefs as a member of the church. I would just talk about light being the light of Christ.
Okay. So in other words, identifying someone as light or dark would not be something that you would do.
No.
Okay. And discussing the issue of portals, there was some discussion with the prosecuting attorney about portals. And please bear with me. A portal is what exactly?
It was made known to me by Lori that portals are something they created by saying some type of prayer, I think, and
Okay.
creating a place where they could communicate spiritually to each other.
Okay. And that's not something that you would practice as well?
No.
Okay. Okay. I noticed that a lot of your testimony when you were talking about zombies and talking about information about various levels of light and dark, and frankly, most of the subject was information that was conveyed to you by Lori. Would that be fair?
Yes.
You didn't talk to Chad very often, did you?
No.
And in all the time that you knew him, I would say less than a handful of times you actually spoke with him, right?
I'd say so.
Would that be fair?
It'd be fair.
Okay. So when I was listening to your testimony earlier with Miss Blake, a comment that you continually made was that Chad told Lori and Lori told me, and I may be paraphrasing that the wrong way, but in essence, that's what you were saying, right?
Correct.
So I guess what I'm asking is you're relying on what Lori Vallow is telling you, and you don't really know whether what she's telling you is the truth or not, do you?
I would say I wouldn't know 100% sure. No.
Okay. Because Lori has lied to you before,
Yes.
and she's been untruthful to you about other things, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you talked a little bit about the whereabouts of JJ, and in your view, she lied to you about that, right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, when I listened to the tape recording, remember the tape that Miss Blake played at the end of the conversation that you tape recorded? Now, prior to that tape recording, had you talked to any law enforcement agency about recording that conversation?
Never.
And I noticed it was interesting because before you started the tape recording, you identified who you were and time and all of that, and made a very clear, succinct record of what was going on. And it sounds like you just deliberately knew in advance you were going to tape. Is that correct?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So you knew what the subject was going to be, and you knew what to answer and what not to answer while you were on that tape, right?
I had no idea what the conversation, how it was going to flow. So I can't say that that's true.
Well, you knew the subject of what the conversation was because you initiated that.
Sure.
Okay. And when I listen to the tape, and if we have to listen to it again, we can. But when I listen to the tape, it sounds like Lori's responses were in the singular. And what I mean by that, as an example, I had to move her to somewhere else, talking about Tylee. It wasn't they had to move her, it was I had to move her. Do you recall that?
I believe so.
And then the other one again in the singular. I will do whatever the Lord needs me to do.
Yes.
Okay. So again, in the singular, when you and Lori and I guess Chad was in the background, he talked a little bit about his experiences with Tammy, but Lori Vallow's comments were not we will or they will. It was I will in the singular. Do you recall that?
That sounds familiar.
Right. Well, do you need to listen to it again to make sure, or are you pretty
No.
clear?
No, it's
Okay.
good.
And then when you talk to Lori about Alex, about saying the things that Alex did about, you don't want to know. Okay. She said again in the singular, I don't know why he would say that. Not we don't know why he would say that. It's I don't know why he would say that. Right?
Right.
Okay. Now, initially when the investigation started over the disappearance of JJ, and that was close to Thanksgiving time, correct?
Between October and November. Yeah,
Well, the end of November when the
Yeah.
police showed up, right?
Yeah.
You remember that, right?
we do.
Okay, so you do have a recollection of about that when this took place, right? Okay. Basically, you received a call from the police, correct?
Correct.
And initially, it wasn't that you kind of lied. You lied to the police officers. Remember that?
I do.
So when you said you kind of maybe weren't truthful in the beginning, no, you lied to the police,
Sure.
correct?
Sure.
Okay. And then after you told the police a lie about having JJ with you, correct? You then, after some more prompting from the police, you sort of cleared that up, right?
I don't-
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the prior testimony.
Sustained.
Okay. So how did that play out then after you initially lied to the police? How did it play out that you then corrected yourself with law enforcement after your initial lie?
I went to see them personally and talked to them about everything I knew.
Okay. And that's when you realized that, oh, well, my lie to them isn't going to hold up. I better sort of tell them something else, right?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative and mischaracterizes the prior testimony.
Sustained.
Okay, so the purpose of going back to the police was to clear up your initial lie, correct?
No,
Oh, it wasn't?
no.
Well, the purpose of going back to the police was to tell them what you felt they needed to hear, right?
I felt an obligation to share everything I knew with them.
Okay. And I guess that obligation wasn't so strong when you initially told the police the lie that you had JJ, right?
It was a conflict within me.
Okay. And that conflict within you said, it's more important that I lie for Lori Vallow than it is I tell the police the truth, right?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative and misstates the prior testimony.
That is overruled. You can
So-
answer. Hold on, there wasn't an answer.
Sorry, Judge.
Sorry.
You need me to have her recite the question again? Ms. Clerk, could you state the question for me, please?
I don't know how to answer that other than say it was a difficult moment for me, and that's just what I did.
Okay, so is being here today a difficult moment for you?
Of course it is.
Okay, and you're having some struggles because you're having some struggles because at some point you have information about JJ Vallow and about what happened to JJ Vallow, correct?
Best of my knowledge.
That's what?
Best of my knowledge, I'm sharing all that I know about.
So I want to go to the timeline of Chad Daybell a little bit.
Okay.
And you talked about arriving in Rexburg for the weekend of the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, that time frame. I guess Monday was the 23rd, Sunday was the 22nd, 21st on Saturday, 20th on Friday, 19th. And my recollection when I reviewed all of the reports and the other testimony that you've given, I was under the impression you arrived on Thursday.
I thought it was Wednesday, but it could have been Thursday. It's been too long to remember.
Okay, so the comment that you said that you saw Chad Daybell 2, 3, or 4 times previously in testimony, you're not sure about that either, correct?
Well, I can recall certain moments. I'd have to sit down and recall every time I saw him and
Okay.
think about that a little bit more.
Okay, so we aren't clear about how many times we saw Chad on that weekend, right?
Not 100% clear.
Okay. And let's kind of go over the timeline for that weekend if we could. If you can try to remember it if possible. You arrived not on Wednesday like you just previously testified to. You arrived on Thursday, right?
Is that right? I don't remember.
Okay.
You'd have to look at documents to show that. I'm
You-
fine. I'm fine with that. It doesn't matter to me if it was Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay. And again, you said you flew in?
That's right.
And what time did you fly in?
I feel like it was in the afternoon, but I can't recall the time.
And please don't let me mischaracterize your testimony, but my recollection is on that first day that you flew in on the Thursday, you didn't see Chad Daybell.
I believe it was either that evening or the next evening. I'm not recalling that.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm questioning you about this is the next evening, and I almost said it, your boyfriend at the time came into town, correct?
Yeah, Friday.
And that was later in the afternoon, late in the evening, right?
That's right.
So when your boyfriend came into town, you hadn't seen Chad yet before your boyfriend arrived, correct?
That's not true.
No, you did?
Yeah, I saw Chad
When did you see him?
previous to that.
What time?
Well, it was in the evening. I remember when we walked around the track at BYU, Idaho. It was in the evening. It was getting darker outside.
Okay. And that's the interaction that you described between Lori and Chad.
Part of it, yeah.
Now, one of the things when I listened to Lori's tape, what I was curious about, and I guess I didn't understand, was that on the tape recording with you and Chad and Lori, you talked to her about the issue of adultery,
Mhm,
that she was having a relationship with a married man
mhm,
and she was a married woman.
correct.
Okay, and that is what was the phrase you used to describe what that is?
Inappropriate, maybe? I don't remember.
But it had a religious connotation to it, that it was in violation of something.
We were referencing one of the people in the Book of Mormon and talking about a certain king that had that type of behavior.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she said something about divorce.
Right.
And I'm going off of my recollection, but while you and David were going through your relationship in the beginning, he was still married, wasn't he? Or had he completed his divorce at that point?
He was in the process of completing it.
So he was still technically married at that point, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. Okay. So then David arrived on Friday.
Yes.
Did you see Chad at all on Friday?
I can't remember if I saw him Friday.
Okay. And then you were there for, I don't remember the name of the conference. Firm? Was that the name of the conference?
Trying to remember if that was Firm Foundation, maybe. Okay.
Was that, well, I
think that's the one.
I think
it
we're
was.
both struggling to find out which one that
Yeah.
was.
Yeah,
which of those.
that I think that's what they referenced. It's my memory.
Okay. Firm Foundation. What is Firm Foundation?
It's a few people that got together and talked about evidences of the Book of Mormon and some science. We're talking a lot about science
Okay.
as well that weekend.
Okay. And that started early in the morning on that Saturday morning, right?
Sometime Saturday morning. I'm not recalling exactly the timing, but I would say sometime in the morning.
And then it ran till relatively late that night.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I recall it was 10 plus hours of
Yeah.
the seminar. It was an all-day event, right?
I think so, yeah,
And that was basically all day Saturday, correct?
correct.
Okay. And then we go to Sunday, right?
Right.
And my recollection is, I'm going off of memory, is everybody went to church that morning?
I don't remember anybody going to church.
You don't remember Chad going to church?
No.
Do you remember a discussion with Chad and David about going to see a piece of property after Chad gets out of church on Sunday?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember him saying, it could be, I just don't recall it, but it could be. But yes, they were going to go look at some property.
And after church, after they got done with their services and everybody was going to church, and I can't remember if you and David went to church that morning, but there was a reference to Chad and you guys were waiting for him to finish up church before you went to visit a piece of property, right?
Yeah, I feel like he might have been the only one if he did go. Yeah, I don't
So,
recall anybody else going. I just don't recall it.
okay. So Chad, obviously you didn't see him Sunday morning until you guys went out to see the property that Sunday afternoon.
I don't recall seeing him
Okay.
till then.
But you do recall going out to a piece of property, and I want to say south and east of Chad's property.
I wouldn't know the directions.
Me neither. But you went out there and do you recall who was out there when you went to look at that piece of property?
So it was Chad and I believe a man that was a realtor and me and David. I think Alex might have been there. And then there was a couple that drove by and, spoke to all of us for a few minutes and then they left.
And I don't recall, was Lori there as well?
No, she wasn't.
Okay. She was at home with who?
I'm assuming she was at home with her son.
JJ. Okay. Because after you folks went out to look at this piece of property, you went directly back to Lori's townhome, correct?
I think so.
Yeah. And we don't know where Chad when he went home, I presume, right? You don't know.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Okay. So was this a piece of property that I almost said it again, your boyfriend, and please forgive me if I meant to say husband or boyfriend, it's going to be tough for me, but your boyfriend at the time was looking at a piece of property to purchase, correct?
They were introducing the idea of purchasing it, but he had no concept if he would do it or not, but it was something they proposed to him.
Okay. Well, I understood it a different way. I understood that your boyfriend was interested in potentially developing a piece of property and asked Chad to introduce him to a realtor. That's the way I understood it.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike. Counsel's testifying.
Judge,
The question was asked and answered.
Sustained.
Is it possible that it was your boyfriend who was looking at a piece of property and asked Chad to refer him to a real estate agent?
I don't believe so.
Okay. But in any event, you and Alex and your boyfriend David and this real estate person and Chad went out to look at this piece of property, correct?
Correct.
And then you went back home, and that was late afternoon, if I recall. Is that correct?
I feel it feels like it was.
Yeah. And then at that point, the one of the projects that you and Lori, I think it was just you and Lori, were involved was starting to prepare to do what's called a podcast.
Are you talking about the evening, the one on Sunday evening?
That Sunday, we're on Sunday right now, I think.
Yeah. So yeah. We were going to sometime do it. We weren't sure exactly we were going to get to it, but we finally got to it on Sunday night.
Right. And correct me, was it just you and Lori, or was David involved in that too?
All three of us.
The
Yes.
three of you. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then you were going to do this podcast. and you did that, and my recollection is it started at like 8 or 9 o'clock,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
and it went till after midnight.
Yeah, somewhere. I knew it was like around midnight. I don't know if it was after it. I just know it was kind of late.
Okay, so you didn't see Chad other than on Sunday. You saw Chad for the land. And you didn't see him that night during the podcast, right?
He might have come over after the land. I don't recall, but he was not at the podcast.
Okay. And you don't recall whether he was there after the land, though. You're saying he may have.
It's possible.
Okay. Okay. But then during the podcast, my understanding is that sometime during the podcast, you observed Alex Cox carrying JJ Vallow on Sunday night with his head on his shoulders upstairs.
That's right.
Okay. And you don't know which bedroom he put JJ in, is that right?
I did not witness where he put him, but he was not in JJ's room or he was not in Tylee's room.
Okay. But you and David were in Tylee's room that night.
No, we were in both. Well, no, it was JJ's room.
Oh, you were in JJ's room?
Yeah, it was JJ's room.
Okay. Now, in terms of the bedrooms, when you walk up the stairs, there's 3 bedrooms up there, correct?
Yes.
And they're all relatively close bedrooms. Would you agree with that?
Tylee and JJ's were close and Lori's was down the hallway.
Okay. But when we say down the hallway, that's a relative term, isn't it?
Well, they're not as close as the other two.
Right. But they're also not a long distance away. This was not a large townhome, was it?
No, it was just from one end of the townhome to the other.
Right. It's a short distance to one bedroom.
I guess relative to a lot of things, yes.
Okay. Okay. So when you went to bed at whatever time that was after the podcast, at that point, you were presuming that Lori also went to bed and decided to lay down with JJ, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you and David you went to sleep after some prayer.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't know where JJ was that night, correct?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay. But you were in the house when Alex brought him up initially at what time was that when Alex brought him up again?
I don't recall. It was a little bit, maybe a few hours into us doing the podcast.
Okay. And then you said David had, I don't want to put words, and he had a nightmare or a vision?
They kind of felt like both. I'm not really sure. It was just a bad experience he had.
Okay.
You'd have to ask him what he felt like it was.
You don't remember?
I remember he was very alarmed by it and upset by it.
Okay. And was he alarmed enough and upset enough that did both of you get up and knock on the door of Lori's door?
No.
Did either of you try to locate Lori and say, is everything okay? Because this was alarming.
I did.
Did you knock on the door of the
Yeah, I went over to her door and tried to open it and it was locked.
Okay, but you didn't knock, right?
I might have. I don't recall. I just know I tried to get in.
Okay, and it wasn't opened.
Right.
Did you go down to the other bedroom that was closer to where you and David were staying and check on that bedroom?
No.
Okay. Okay. And then after this alarming event that was so traumatic to David, you slept in until what time?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I probably woke up around 7 or something in the morning. I don't know.
Okay. And from previous testimony, you indicated that you took off and left at about 9:30. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
Okay. And at that point, again, even though David had this traumatic experience about this nightmare, you didn't ask to see JJ, did you?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Overruled.
You didn't ask to see JJ.
It's possible I did. I don't recall what I said to her when I came downstairs.
Okay. Well, you make a lot of comments, it's possible, but you don't remember asking to see JJ, do you?
I remember when your meeting with somebody for a full weekend, you don't remember all the conversations you have. You do your best to remember all that you can recall.
Well, I appreciate that because, you know, in the beginning of your testimony with the prosecuting attorney, you were very clear about all of these memories that you had about zombies, about dark and light.
Objection, Your Honor. This is a narrative. Move to strike. It's argumentative.
Sustained.
You were very clear on your testimony about zombies. You didn't have a memory loss about that, did you?
No,
You didn't have a memory loss about dark and light, right?
no.
You didn't have a memory loss about how often you saw Chad, right?
Sometimes I remember seeing him. It wasn't a memorable weekend to remember when he came in and out all the time.
But you were very clear about all of the things that Lori Vallow told you at the bequest of Chad. You were real clear about that, weren't you? No?
I said, yeah.
Okay. Judge, I don't know if you want to, I unfortunately have quite a ways to go now, and I apologize to the court, but I got a ways to go.
Oh, you don't need to apologize, Mr. Pryor. We'll take our time to get through this witness, but we are towards the end of where we're going to get with the witness today. As I mentioned, the court's got another hearing to take up this afternoon. So if there's no objection from either side, I would like to recess for the day and resume tomorrow. State okay with that?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blake.
Yes, Judge.
Very well. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as you retire for the evening, go home, please follow the court's continuing instruction and admonishment to not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. And please don't do anything to research or look the case up, so you can remain unbiased in the case and make your decision just based on the evidence you hear here at trial. If you happen to run across any media about this case, please try to avert your attention from that. And with that in mind, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning. Thank you.
All rise, please.
Yes, thank you. We'll be in recess until this next hearing starts at 3:30. The witness can step down, and I will just remind you, Ms. Gibb, also you're not to discuss your testimony with others that have testified in the case.